I want to pick up the last segment of the book and start to get us unstuck. We've been sort of put into a position where at the end of the long journey all the way to Mount Hor, he's lost his sister. Moses is who we're speaking of. Lost his sister, lost his brother, is facing the changeover of leadership as Eleazar picks up, and there's an entire different feel to the last part of this book. The last box is chapter 21 to 36. I'm going to be quick here, but I think we need to start it off to get us shook up just a little bit. Chapter 21 is a story about God stepping into the people of Israel to help them to understand that they needed to follow him. And I want to start by saying in chapter 21 that a lot of our pain isn't because we don't know what God wants us to do. It is because we do know what God wants us to do and we want to do something else. I think there's a lot of people that walk around going, the will of God is such a mystery. And I don't really think that's true. I really think that most Christians don't struggle because they're not sure what the will of God is. They struggle with the parts of the will of God they know they don't want to do. Therefore, he's not clearer with them on the other things because there are 3 things in their life they won't deal with that he keeps telling them to deal with. Now, that being the case, let me stop and say that there are 2 stories here in chapter 21 that I just sort of want to set together. The first one is how God provides a victory for those who say they want what he wants. And so you see them in the beginning as God is trying to redirect them and give them a little bit of encouragement. And chapter 21 verse 1 says, when the Canaanite, the king of Arad, who lived in the Negev, heard that Israel was coming by way of Ataraim, then he fought against Israel and took some of them captive. The people had been refused entry to Edom to go through Edom. Now, maybe some geography is probably in order here because it's a little bit hard to follow without it. So we're going to go down here. We're going to go to Egypt, Sinai, Sea of Galilee, Dead Sea, and get ourselves down there. So Egypt is down here. The land that belongs to Israel is up here. And the people have come, and they are now up to the Edomite territory, which is here. They were refused entry to cut across this way, and so they ended up having to go this way. And the south part of the country is the Negev region. As they come in here, the Negev has 3 basic lobes to it. There's Arad in the east, Beersheba in the center, and Gerar in the west. And they tried to come up this way, trying to stay close to the Dead Sea. And as they try to get there, they're blocked from coming into Edom, so they go by way of Arad. And this says that the king of Arad went out, he heard they were coming, he fought against Israel, he took some of them captive. Look in verse 2. So Israel made a vow to the Lord, if you will indeed deliver this people into my hand, then I will utterly destroy their cities. So what you get is a group of people that when the enemy threatens, they offer a prayer and they say, God, I will completely wipe out the cities as you have instructed us to do if you will just deliver them into our hands. And verse 3 says, the Lord heard the voice of Israel and delivered up the Canaanites, and they were utterly destroyed with them and all their cities. Thus the name of the place has been called Hormah. The whole idea here is that they come, they face the problem, they turn to God, and God delivers them from the problem. So the first 3 verses is a very straightforward, Lord, this is what we need. All right, I'll give it to you. Now do what I said. When you get to chapter 21 verse 4, you start a second story. This one is not the plan for a success. This one's a plan for a defeat. And in fact, when I say a plan for a defeat, I know that sounds weird, but it starts with a problem, and the problem is discontent in verse 4. This wasn't external, it was internal. So verses 1 to 3 is an external problem. Verse 4 begins an internal problem inside the camp. Then they set out from Mount Hor by way of the Red Sea to go around to the land of Edom, and the people became impatient because of the journey. Now, here's the thing. They start going the long way around to go all the way around the Edomites. What they're going to do is double back this way, go down and go all the way around and come that way. Instead of going this way, they're going to go all the way around and go that way. God never told them to do that. So in essence, they took on a whole bunch of hardships. You need to know that the further this way and the further that way you get, the more rugged the deserts. So by going this way around the Edomites, they're going way out into a very, very difficult, arduous desert. It's camel country out there. You don't try to get through on a horse, the horse will die. You don't try to get through on a donkey, the donkey will die. You don't try to take flocks and herds that way, they will die. And so these people have made up in their own mind, listen, I think what we'll do is go all the way around, except for going all the way around is probably going to kill them. Now God never instructed them to go that way. So then in verse 5, guess what? It's not working out. Because when you decide to do something God never told you to do, don't be surprised when it's not working. And so in verse 5 it says, the people spoke against God and Moses, not against themselves for their own choice, but against God and against Moses. And it says, why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? There is no food, there is no water. We loathe this miserable food. What they seem to have forgotten was that the grapes were growing just fine, back in the land where they were supposed to be, not in the place they chose to be. So what they did was they said to God in the beginning, if you'll help us, we'll take out Arad. And then instead of going further to the north, they turned around and went all the way south. Well, you're never going to find the blessing of God when you're running away from it. Okay? You can't walk in the opposite direction and expect the grapevines to follow you. So here's the problem. Let me offer an illustration if I can. You just want a vacation to a wonderful resort, all expenses paid. Dinner shows, meals, accommodations, everything's included. They even included in the package not only the air tickets, but a beautiful red convertible to drive for the holiday. This has the potential to be a wonderful vacation, so you study the brochure, and you look at the pictures, and you can hardly believe how beautiful the place is that you have just won. You get on the plane, and on the appointed day, you fly there with your spouse, you pick up your rental car, you follow the map to the entrance of the resort, and just as you reach the resort, you decide to turn opposite the signs and go into a wooded area across from the entrance. And in the woods, you see an abandoned shack. Instead of going to the resort entrance, you and your spouse spend the entire vacation in the misery of an abandoned shack. And when you get home, you write to the company and you complain that none of the amenities that they promised you were available in that shack. And they write back and say, but you didn't go where we told you. That's the problem here. God called them where to go, and instead of that, they're going other places and then going, God, you're not being fair. Now listen, because this is our lives. God tells you there's a certain kind of person you should look for when you're going to attach your life to theirs for life. What do? You ignore that and go find somebody who's not that. Then you blame God when your marriage doesn't work out. Hello? He didn't tell you to go after that kind of person. He didn't tell you that's where to look for them. You're not going to find God's direction when running after the wrong things. So ultimately we get down to verse 6 and look at the first product. There's a series of products, but the first product is pain. And it says the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people so that many of Israel died. You know, it seems like sometimes the only way for God to get us to reverse a wrong-headed course is to put us in the middle of pain in the journey to get us to pull back. And I don't want to sound insensitive, but very often in our society, we create our own troubles by deliberate departure from God's Word, and then we're mystified when it doesn't work. I am sitting here telling you right now that the course that we are embarking on in the destruction of the family is going to bring us back 1,000-fold trouble in this country. It is going to. I have no doubt about that. Bottom line is we're going to do it, and then we're going to get down there and we're going to go, how did this happen to our country? We did it. We did it. Pain is only part of it, though. The second product is that when the people get the message in verses 7, 8, and 9, repentance is a product. Guilt wasn't buried that deeply. So verse 7 says, so the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned because we have spoken against the Lord and you. Intercede with the Lord that he may remove the serpents from us. And Moses interceded for the people. Now, whether we admit it out loud or not, we often know exactly what we're doing that is displeasing to the Lord. Do you disagree with that? I think most people know exactly the list of things they're doing in their life that are displeasing to the Lord. I don't think he's that complicated. I think the trouble is we don't really want to do what he says do. And those troubles that become serious and painful sometimes will cause us to go running back to his arms. That's their purpose. They're not there to scar us. They're not there to wound us. They're there to drive us back into his arms. Forgiveness had to be orchestrated by God, but responded to by men. So look at verse 8. Then the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent, set it on a standard. It will come about that everyone who is bitten when he looks at it, he will live. And Moses made a bronze serpent, set it up on a standard, and it came about that if a serpent bit any man, when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. Now, you know that later on this comes up in the Bible again, right? Where does this come up? This comes up in the Gospel of John, in John 3, you know, the famous John 3:16. But if you keep looking at the passage, back up a little bit, it says in John 3:14, as Moses lifted up in the serpent in the wilderness, even so the Son of Man must be lifted up, so that whosoever believes in him will have eternal life. This becomes a story that's prototypical of Jesus being raised up on a cross. In other words, I'll provide it, but you got to acknowledge it. Jesus' death doesn't save anyone who doesn't acknowledge it, who doesn't accept him. So it's interesting because the end of the passage creates this pattern of renewal. Look at verses 10 through 18. The rest of the passage is a detail of a series of camps and battles. Look at 21:10. Now the sons of Israel moved out and encamped in Ovot. In verse 11, from Ovot to Iar-Vorim, opposite Moab to the east. Verse 12, to set out they encamped at Wadi Zered. 13, they journeyed and camped on the other side of the Arnon in the wilderness that comes out of the border of the Amorites. In 16, they continued to Beer, that is the well where the Lord said to Moses, assemble the people that I may give them water. Then verse 17, Israel sang this song, spring up, O well, sing to it. The well which the leaders sank, which the nobles of the people dug with the scepter and with their staffs. In other words, the pattern of it shows you a series of moves. Follow me and I'll give you new lands, new people, new lands, new people, new lands, new people. You just got to follow what I'm asking you to do. So the whole first part of the chapter is them resisting. 1 to 3, they obey. 4 to 9, they don't. 10 to 18, they're following God again, and they're coming after it. But what was the intervening thing that got them back on track? Fiery serpents. And by the way, fiery serpents isn't serpents of fire. It's serpents that bite you with a burn. It's a burning kind of venom. So we would call them venomous serpents. Here's the bottom line. Their response to God's rescue was their healing. Don't look at the serpent, die. Look at the serpent, don't die. What's the response? Your response is your responsibility. And that's what God gave them. Now, that's chapter 21. When you move to chapter 22, I want you to see that after they have a series of victories that are now under their belt, then it says, then the sons of Israel journeyed and encamped on the plains of Moab, beyond the Jordan, opposite Jericho. They have finally made it all the way to the area just on the north edge of the Dead Sea. If Jerusalem is over here, they are opposite over here. This is Mount Nebo. And what's important about that is that's as far in as Moses will get. Moses actually travels with the people up to Bashan, up to this area, turns around and comes back here, and that's where the end of his life will be. What's important for you is chapter 22 offers you 4 distinct personalities, little snapshots of 4 personalities, okay? So let's take a look at them and let's see if we can mark them off. First, we got to put this in context. If you go back to 21:21, follow the line of context. God's people are moving forward. They're on the journey. Obedient believers become a threat to the people who are living in the land. And in verses 1 to 4, God has his own press secretaries that compound the testimony of his people. God sends out people to enunciate. God is on the move. God is on the move. His people are on the move. Look at verse 1. Then the sons of Israel journeyed and camped into the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan opposite Jericho. Now Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. So Moab was in great fear because of the people. They were numerous. And Moab was in the dread of the sons of Israel. So what happens is you have Edomites, then you have Moabites. Moab is this area, and up here, Ammonites. And remember, where is Ammon? Where is Moab? Where is Edom? Wherever they're living that year. They're movable peoples. By the way, down here, Amalekites have this area down here closer to the Red Sea. So Amalekites, Edomites, Moabites, Ammonites, and all of these people are individual tribes living in encampments around wells and moving around as best they can. All of them are shepherding class people that generally have sheep and goats. And what I want you to see is that as Israel's coming in, Israel has marched right up into the land and is in the heart of the land of the Moabites, and the Moabites are afraid to take them on. That's the setting. Now, there's some confusion because the unbelievers start looking for an ally in disobedient believers. And so here's what you see in verse 5. He sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Petor, which is near the river, in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, Behold, a people came out of Egypt. Behold, they cover the surface of the land. They are living opposite of me. Now therefore, please come, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I will be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. Verse 7, so the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination in their land. They came to Balaam and repeated Balak's words to him. Where did they go? Where does he live? It's hard when you're reading the passage to know where exactly is Balak from. He comes from the land of Abraham. He comes from all the way back in the Chaldean area. So in other words, remember, God had called Abraham from Ur of the Chaldees, then he went up to Haran in Syria, then he came into the land. This is part of the Abrahamic family, but all the way back in Mesopotamia. How do they know that this man who belongs to the family of Abraham is able to bless or curse people from God on high? This is a televangelist with a great following. This guy's got people know him as being this great man of God, and he's from where Abraham came from. In other words, somebody asked a couple of classes ago, what about all the other people on earth? How does everybody else get to follow God? This is a guy who's following the God of Abraham from the place of Abraham, countries away from the story, showing you that into the story are these Melchizedek types or Balak types that God introduces. Now, Balaam types, I'm sorry, that God introduces. The important thing is this. Balaam comes from all the way over in Mesopotamia. Balak, who's a local ruler of the Moabites, sends for him and tries to hire him for a curse. Now, if he's a guy who knows God, then it's not going to be as easy as pay me so much and I'll use God to curse him, right? So Balak of Moab decides that he needs to hire a great seer or a great prophet, and he sends these guys. Now, the point is, Balaam is a believer. He's a follower of the God of Abraham. However, he is brought there under the pretense of being a prophet for hire. Get down to verse 8. He said to them, spend the night here, and I will bring back the word to you as the Lord may speak to me. And the leaders of Moab stayed with Balaam. They had gone on a long trip, several days all the way over into Mesopotamia. They come in to visit with Balaam, and Balaam says, all right, what do you need? They say, we need a word from God to curse this people. Now, he doesn't know who the people are. He's not going to give them a word based on some political intrigue. He doesn't know who they are. He says, look, I'll go talk to God. Whatever he tells me, that's what I'm going to tell you. Okay? So stay the night. Let me go talk to God. Then God came to Balaam and said, Who are these men with you? Then Balaam said to God, Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent word to me. Behold, there's a people who came out of Egypt, and they cover the surface of the land, meaning a really big group of people. And it says, now come curse them for me. Perhaps I may be able to fight against them and drive them out. God said to Balaam, do not go with them. Underline, do not go with them, because you're going to need that later. Do not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. So Balaam arose in the morning and said to Balak's leaders, go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. The leaders of Moab arose and went to Balak and said, Balaam refused to come with us. All right. In many ways, it would be better for a man or woman to never meet a believer than to meet a disobedient believer. This guy is showing obedience to God, but watch what happens as they come back to him a second time. Look at verse 15. Balak said again to the leaders, and he sent them more numerous and more distinguished than the former. What does that tell you? He sent better guys on the second trip. They were more distinguished, they spoke better, they had a better gift. And then verse 16, they came to Balaam and said, thus says Balak son of Zippor, let nothing, I beg you, hinder you from coming to me. For I will indeed honor you richly. I will do whatever you say to me. Please come then, curse this people for me. Balaam replied to the servants of Balak, though Balak were to give me this house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything, either small or great, contrary to the command of the Lord my God. Now please, you also stay here tonight, and I will find out what else the Lord will speak to me. God came to Balaam at night and said, if the men have come to call you, rise up and go with them, but only the word which I speak to you shall you do. So Balaam arose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the leaders of Moab. This is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Balak didn't hear what God said concerning Israel. Only Balaam was unable to come to them, and finally he has to get there only after he gets a second invitation. Balak offers Balaam more money. Even this guy Balaam knows that those enticements should be openly shunned. He shouldn't say, well, if you're going to pay me more, then I'll come. But God let the prophet move ahead in his own desires. It's hard for you to see it here. You're going to see later on in the Bible that he is banging on God to go. He wants to go. And God is telling him no. And then finally God says, all right, if you want to go, go. But don't tell him anything I don't tell you to tell him. It's hard to see this in this time. But later on, Peter is going to tell you more about this in the New Testament. And he's going to tell you that what was in Balaam's heart was already wrong. Now what's interesting is in verse 22, God was angry because he was going, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. So it sounded like God said, okay, you can go, but in verse 22, it's very clear God doesn't want him to go. In Moses' writing, he doesn't pull out why. Balaam's looking for a good check. And God says, you tell him only what I tell you to tell him. Now what's interesting is, even though it's not immediately clear that Balaam was given permission for something that he really wanted to do, that's what happens. A further scripture search is the one that tells you this. Now, the first two from the Hebrew scriptures that talk about this are these. The two passages in the Hebrew scriptures that address this issue are Deuteronomy 23, which you have already studied. And in Deuteronomy 23, it says, no Ammonite or Moabite shall enter the assembly of the Lord. None of their descendants, even to the 10th generation, shall ever enter the assembly of the Lord, because they did not meet you with water and food on the way when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired Balaam, son of Beor, from Petor of Mesopotamia. That's, by the way, how I know where he's coming from. In Deuteronomy 23, it tells you that he's coming from Mesopotamia, okay? To curse you. Nevertheless, the Lord your God was not willing to listen to Balaam. So Deuteronomy 23 tells the background story here that where Balaam was coming from was the land of Abraham's fathers. And that's how you know where Petor is. Otherwise, you'd just be going, he's from Petor near the river. Well, that's great. Don't know which river, and I don't know where Petor is. But Deuteronomy 23 says he came from the land of our fathers. He's a distant cousin to the Jewish people. Now what's interesting is, or a distant uncle, should I say it that way? In Micah 6:5 it says, my people, remember now what Balak king of Moab counseled and what Balaam the son of Beor answered him, and from Shittim to Gilgal, so that you might know the righteous acts of the Lord. He says, as the story ends, Balaam's going to say something that God says, and Micah's going to point back to it. All right, lots of words. Here's what's really going on here. Moabites are absolutely scared by the size of Israel. So they go all the way over to Mesopotamia, and they drag over Balaam because he is known to be a prophet who can speak. And when he curses the people, even though he may not tell them the truth, if we can hire you to curse him, we can get our people to buck up and fight. They're scared to fight. But if they know that you're this great prophet and you're now speaking against Israel, they'll have the oomph to get up and go fight the battle. Now, interestingly enough, in 2 Peter and in Jude, the mentionings of Balaam are all that he was on the take. In 2 Peter 2:15, it's very clear that they made the wages of unrighteousness. It's very clear that he's on the take. But you don't know that just reading this text. Now, keep going with the story. Second half of verse 22, it says, God doesn't leave the scene, okay? He's setting up a confrontation with Balaam. Balaam is the wayward believer in the whole scene. And it says, now he was riding on his donkey, and his two servants were with him. It's interesting. God didn't send him alone into the world. And he sent him, and he's riding along on his donkey. However, the donkey's not the jackass of the two of them. Okay? That's the play on word. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go, here comes this stubborn, obstinate believer who's being disobedient riding on his jackass. But the jackass turns out to be the one who's following God. Listen. It says, verse 23, when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, the donkey turned off by the way and went into a field. Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back onto the way. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path of the vineyards with a wall on one side and a wall on the other. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pressed herself against the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he struck her again. So here's the jackass on top of the donkey, striking the donkey when the donkey's doing what's right and the jackass isn't. That's the story. That's why I like the story. Then the angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn the right or to the left. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. Balaam was angry and struck the donkey with a stick. Now, spiritual sensitivity sinks when disobedience flourishes. And finally the donkey says, all right, that's enough. Okay, this is a great story. What I love is the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and it said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have struck me 3 times? Hey, bub! Then Balaam said to the donkey, first of all, I would be going, what? You talk? But remember, Balaam has seen God prophesy. Balaam knows God is involved in the scene. So, because you have made a mockery of me, if there had been a sword in my hand, I would have killed you by now. And the donkey said to Balaam, am I not your donkey on which you have ridden all your life to this day? Have I ever been accustomed to do so to you? He said, no. What's interesting to me is the way that the story reads. The donkey's going, look, you're beating on me, and I never do this to you. Now, you get down to verse 31. Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed all the way to the ground. The angel of the Lord said to him, why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out as an adversary, because your way was contrary to me. But the donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, I would have surely have killed you just now and let her live. Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the way against me. Now then, if it is displeasing to you, I will turn back. You see what happened? When you decide that you don't want to walk in tune with God in your life, you lose the spiritual sensitivity to see what God is doing. He's still doing stuff, you just don't see it. And the donkey has the wherewithal to see what God is doing, bless you, but the writer doesn't have the wherewithal to see what God is doing. So what happens when you don't see God at work, but God is at work? You end up taking it out on those who do see God at work. So in a very strange way, the disobedient believer starts harassing those who know better. And one of the things that happens is God had to open the eyes of Balaam to get him to drop to his knees. Verse 35, but the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with the men, but you shall speak only the word which I tell you. So Balaam went along with the leaders of Balak. So what happens is he ends up going to the camp. He ends up completing his journey to Moab, but this time he's not going in disobedience. He's going having said, God, I was wrong. I should have been listening. I will turn back right now. He says, no, don't turn back. I didn't want you to be here, but I'm going to follow this through. What you meant for evil, I'm going to use for good. And then what you see in verse 36 is when Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, which is on the Arnon River at the extreme end of the border. Then Balak said to Balaam, did I not urgently send you to call you? Why did you not come to me? Am I really unable to honor you? So Balaam said to Balak, behold, I have come to you now. Am I able to speak anything at all? The word that God puts in my mouth, that is what I shall speak. And Balaam went with Balak. And they came to Kirat Huzot. Balak sacrificed oxen and sheep and sent some to Balaam and to the leaders who were with him. Then it came about in the morning that Balak took Balaam and brought him to the high places of Baal. And he saw from there a portion of the people. Now look what happens. This is a guy who God has gotten a hold of his life. Along the journey, he repented. Would you call him an obedient believer or a disobedient believer at this point? I'm speaking of Balaam. I would say he's obedient in the respect that he's repented. He's offered God to go back. God told him not to. So he is where he is supposed to be because God told him to be there. He has repented of his desire to get cash out of being there. And he has agreed to only speak what God has spoken. But notice that the unbeliever, Balak, felt entitled to the loyalty of the disobedient believer, the once disobedient believer. He felt like he should be, hey, I called for you, why didn't you come? I offered you cash, why didn't you come? By him showing up there, how did he demean the Lord's testimony? Just by being there. It made it look to Balak like God's prophet was for hire, because it looked like God's prophet was for hire. What is interesting to me is, did you notice what the unbeliever does? The unbeliever starts a religious practice right away. 39, 40, 41, he takes this believer to the high place of Baal. Why? Because religion is religion to an unbeliever. He doesn't know one from the other. Our God, your God, who cares what God? It's all the same thing. The narrative began with obedient believers moving forward and a disobedient seer becoming an ally to the world. But the scene ends up with all the believers doing right despite the compromises. And when you unfold it into 23, you're going to start to see what Balaam actually does. But he's got to get up and he's got to start speaking, okay?